The Apache woman was taken to his ranch. But the rancher wasn't as bad as she feared. The sun had barely begun to rise over the desert hills when the Apache woman, Nayeli, awoke to the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grasses. She loved this time of day when the sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks, and the world felt calm and full of possibilities. Her village, tucked between the hills and the river, was still asleep. Smoke from the morning fires curled into the sky, and the sound of birds filled the air. Nayeli often felt a deep connection to this land, as though the earth itself was speaking to her, telling her stories of her ancestors. She loved the quiet moments before the day began, when she could walk along the river, feeling the cool water brush against her feet and imagining the paths of the deer that ran freely nearby. Nayeli lived simply but happily. She spent her days helping her family, collecting herbs and water, and learning the ways of the tribe. Her mother had taught her how to weave baskets and identify plants that could heal minor wounds. Her father had shown her how to track animals and understand the signs in the sky. Life in the village was not easy, but it was filled with love, laughter, and a sense of belonging. She had friends her age, and they would play near the river, chasing each other, laughing until their sides ached. But that morning, the peace of her world was shattered. Nayeli first sensed something was wrong when the dogs began to bark loudly, their voices cutting through the calm like sharp arrows. Then she heard shouting, rough and unfamiliar. Her heart began to race as she ran toward the sound, only to see figures moving quickly through the village, men on horseback with clothes and weapons unlike anything she had seen before. Fear gripped her chest, and she froze, trying to understand what was happening. Before she could react, strong hands grabbed her, lifting her onto a horse. Nayeli struggled, but it was useless. The raiders were fast and skilled, and she had no choice but to go with them. Tears filled her eyes as she looked back at her home, her family, and the life she knew. She called out for her mother, her father, anyone who might hear, but the voices of her people were drowned out by the galloping hooves and the harsh shouts of the raiders. The ride was long and exhausting. The sun climbed higher in the sky, making the air hot and dry. Nayeli's body ached from the rough seat and the constant bouncing of the horse. Her mind raced with fear and confusion. She did not know where they were taking her or why. The raiders said little, only giving harsh commands to stay quiet. Nayeli tried to understand their language, but it was different from anything she had learned. She could only guess that they were taking her far from home. As the hours passed, Nayeli began to notice small details about the man who seemed to be leading the group. He was not like the others. He did not shout as much, and when he did speak, his tone was calmer, almost measured. He rode slightly apart from the others, observing rather than participating in the chaos. Nayeli could not understand his thoughts, but something about him made her pause. Could he be different? Could he be someone she might survive with? She pushed the thought away quickly. She could not allow herself to hope. She had learned that hope could be dangerous when your world was falling apart. During the ride, Nayeli's mind wandered to memories of her family. She remembered her mother's gentle hands and the sound of her father's laughter. She remembered the stories her grandmother told her about the stars and the spirits of their ancestors. These memories were a comfort, a reminder that even in fear, she had a past that could not be taken from her. She clung to these memories, repeating them in her mind like a mantra, trying to keep herself calm. At one point, the riders stopped near a small creek. Nayeli was allowed to drink some water, and she rested her head against the horse's neck. She looked around at the unfamiliar landscape, trying to find something familiar. The hills were different, the trees taller and stranger, and the river narrower than the one near her village. Everything felt foreign and threatening. Yet she noticed the beauty in it as well. The way the sunlight danced on the water, the soft rustle of the leaves, and the distant mountains that looked like they were touching the sky. Even in fear, Nayeli could see the world's small wonders. The journey continued for several days. Nayeli's body grew tired, but her mind stayed alert. She learned to watch the raiders carefully, to notice patterns in their behavior, and to predict when they might give her food or allow her to rest. She observed the landscape, looking for signs of where they might be heading. Her survival depended on her attention to detail and her ability to remain calm under pressure. At night, Nayeli would lie on the ground near the campfires, listening to the sounds of the wild. She heard owls hoot in the distance, the crackle of the fire, and the faint whispers of the river nearby. She tried to imagine her village and her family sleeping safely, and this thought gave her a small measure of peace. She also began to notice the small acts of restraint by the man who led them. He did not strike her, nor did he shout at her. Instead, he watched, sometimes giving orders in a calm voice, other times remaining silent. Nayeli could not understand why he treated her differently, but it gave her a flicker of hope, one she did not dare nurture too much. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of red and gold, Nayeli was allowed to eat. The raiders offered her some bread and dried meat. It was simple food, but after days of uncertainty, she accepted it gratefully. She noticed the man who led them sitting quietly, eating alone, and she realized he was observing her as well. Their eyes met briefly, and for a moment she felt a connection she could not explain. Perhaps he, too, had a story, a past that made him different from the others. Despite her fear, Nayeli began to find small ways to maintain her dignity and her sense of self. She practiced silent prayers to her ancestors, whispered songs from her childhood, and even tried to mark the days in her mind, keeping track of time. These small rituals helped her remember who she was and gave her strength to endure. She knew that if she lost herself completely to fear, she might never survive the journey ahead. By the fourth day, the landscape began to change. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills, and the air smelled different, sweeter and fresher. Nayeli noticed signs of civilization, fences in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint sounds of work and life. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. What kind of place were they taking her to? Would it be worse than what she had already experienced, or could it be a place where she might survive, maybe even find safety? As they approached the outskirts of the ranch, Nayeli's fear returned with full force. She imagined being locked in a small room, treated harshly, and forced to live under the control of strangers. Every story she had heard about settlers came to mind, warning her of cruelty and hardship. Yet beneath her fear, there was a small, unspoken curiosity. She wondered about the life she might find there, the people she would meet, and whether there was even a chance that someone might treat her with kindness. When they finally arrived, Nayeli saw the ranch for the first time. It was larger than she had imagined, with wide fields, grazing animals, and buildings made of wood and stone. The fences were tall but not oppressive, and the smell of hay and earth filled the air. It was different from her village, yet it had its own quiet beauty. She noticed the rancher standing nearby, tall and steady, watching her with careful eyes. He did not shout or make sudden movements. Instead, he seemed calm, measured, and almost thoughtful. For the first time since her capture, Nayeli allowed herself a small breath of relief. Perhaps, she thought, the stories she had heard about all settlers being cruel were not entirely true. Perhaps there were people who were different, people who treated others with care and respect. She did not know what would happen next, but for now she clung to the hope that she might survive and find a way to endure this new world. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the ranch, Nayeli sat quietly, watching the animals and the land. She felt a mix of fear, curiosity, and cautious hope. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew that she would face it with the strength and wisdom her ancestors had given her. Even in the darkest moments, she would remember who she was and where she came from, and that knowledge gave her the courage to take the first steps into an uncertain future. The The next morning, Naeli awoke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft murmur of the wind through the fields. The ranch was already alive with activity. Cows were lowing in the distance, horses were being led out to the pastures, and the distant clatter of tools indicated that someone was preparing for a day of work. Naeli's heart pounded as she realized she would soon have to step out of the small sense of safety she had found the previous evening and face the unknown routines of this ranch. She was led by one of the younger workers, a quiet man who seemed more cautious than the others. He gave her little instructions, pointing to a simple bed in a modest room near the main building. Naeli noted how clean and organized everything was. It was not the dark, harsh confinement she had feared. The walls were made of wood, polished by time, and sunlight streamed through the small windows, filling the room with warmth. She felt a small relief, though she did not dare let herself feel too safe. When she was finally allowed to leave her room, Naeli saw the rancher more closely. He was a tall man, his face weathered by years in the sun, but his eyes were calm and observant. He did not shout or scold. Instead, he simply watched as she took in the surroundings. Naeli's first instinct was to retreat, to hide and wait for an opportunity to return home, but she had no choice. She had to live in this new world, at least for now. The rancher approached her slowly, speaking in a language she did not fully understand. His tone was gentle, and he used gestures to indicate that she should follow him. Naeli hesitated but then took a careful step forward. As she walked beside him, she noticed how he treated the animals with care, speaking softly to the horses and guiding the cows without force. It was a strange sight for her, something completely different from the violent behavior she had feared. Slowly, she began to see a side of him that did not fit the stories she had been told about settlers. Over the next few days, Naeli was introduced to the routines of the ranch. She learned to help feed the animals, gather water, and carry out simple chores. Each task was a challenge, but she approached them with determination. She discovered that she had a talent for understanding the animals, just as she had learned from her father to understand the deer and other wildlife in her village. The horses seemed to respond to her presence, calming when she approached and trusting her hands. The rancher observed her quietly during these days. He did not interfere unless necessary, and his calm presence slowly began to ease her fears. Naeli noticed that he did not demand blind obedience. Instead, he seemed to respect her ability to learn and adapt. She could see the difference between him and the others who had captured her. While they had acted harshly and without thought, he treated her as someone capable, not as someone to simply control. At night, Naeli would lie on her small bed, reflecting on the day's events. She was exhausted from the physical labor, but her mind was active. She thought about her family and her home, wondering what they were doing, whether they were searching for her, and if they were safe. These thoughts were bittersweet, bringing both comfort and sorrow. She often whispered prayers to her ancestors, asking for guidance and protection in this unfamiliar land. One evening, as the sky turned golden with the setting sun, Naeli was asked to help bring the horses back from the pasture. She was nervous, but she remembered the gentle guidance of the rancher and followed his instructions. She approached the horses slowly, speaking softly to calm them. To her surprise, they responded well, and she felt a small sense of pride. The rancher watched from a distance, nodding slightly as she worked. It was the first time she felt a connection, a silent acknowledgement of her efforts. As days turned into weeks, Naeli began to notice more about the rancher. He was not quick to anger, and he valued patience over force. He worked alongside his workers, showing them how to care for the land and the animals. Naeli realized that he had faced many challenges in his life, and this had shaped him into someone who treated others with fairness and respect. She began to understand that he was not a cruel man, and this realization both surprised and confused her. Communication remained a challenge. Nayeli spoke her native Apache language, while the rancher and the workers spoke English. At first, they relied on gestures, simple words, and demonstrations to understand each other. Over time, Nayeli picked up certain words, enough to follow instructions and express basic needs. She also learned to read the rancher's expressions and gestures, understanding more from his actions than from his words. It became a silent, mutual understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. Despite the progress, Nayeli's fear never fully disappeared. She remained cautious, always aware of the power dynamics and the fact that she was far from home. But she also began to notice moments of kindness. The rancher ensuring she had enough food, providing clean water, and occasionally offering a reassuring smile. These small acts, though simple, were profound to Nayeli, who had feared cruelty at every turn. She realized that not everyone in this new world wanted to harm her, and this realization was both comforting and disorienting. One afternoon, while helping mend a fence, Nayeli accidentally cut her hand on a sharp piece of wood. Blood trickled down her palm and pain shot through her arm. She froze, unsure how to react. The rancher noticed immediately. He approached calmly, speaking softly and examining her hand. He cleaned the wound carefully and wrapped it with a cloth, all without anger or judgment. Nayeli felt a strange mix of gratitude and surprise. No one in her village had ever treated her injury with such careful attention, and the gentle handling reassured her in ways she could not yet describe. As she rested that evening, Nayeli reflected on the events of the past weeks. The fear that had once consumed her was slowly giving way to cautious curiosity. She began to observe the ranch with more attention, noting the cycles of work, the rhythms of the animals, and the interactions among the people. She saw that life on the ranch was not easy, but it was fair and structured. There was purpose in every action, and each day brought new lessons. Over time, Nayeli started to feel a sense of belonging, even though she knew she was far from home. She began to appreciate the beauty of the open fields, the quiet of the early mornings, and the way the animals responded to care rather than fear. She realized that this place, while unfamiliar, could offer her a chance to survive and even thrive. It was not the life she had imagined, but it was a life where she could find safety and perhaps even respect. One day, as she worked in the fields, Nayeli noticed a small act of kindness from the rancher that stayed with her. He had taken the time to fix a broken tool for her, ensuring she could work more efficiently. It was such a simple gesture, but to Nayeli, it spoke volumes. She realized that he saw her as more than a captive. He saw her as someone capable, someone who could contribute and learn. This understanding began to shift her perspective. As weeks turned into months, Nayeli began to develop a daily rhythm. She learned to rise with the sun, work alongside the ranch hands, and care for the animals. She still thought often of her family and her tribe, but she also began to see herself as someone who could adapt, someone strong enough to endure challenges. The rancher, in his quiet way, had become a stabilizing presence in her life, someone she could observe and learn from without fear of immediate harm. Evenings were often spent near the fire, where Nayeli would watch the sun set behind the hills. She would reflect on her journey, the hardships she had faced, and the small victories she had achieved. Each day brought new challenges, but it also brought new understanding. She began to see the ranch not as a prison, but as a place where she could grow, learn, and survive. Through all of this, Nayeli's heart remained cautious but open. She had been taken from everything familiar, yet she found herself slowly building a connection to this new land and the people in it. The rancher, whose calm presence and gentle guidance had defied her expectations, became a figure she could observe with trust, if not yet complete faith. She realized that not all humans were cruel, and this insight gave her hope. By the end of the second month, Nayeli had become more confident in her daily tasks. She could feed the animals without fear, carry out chores efficiently, and even anticipate the needs of the ranch. She began to understand the rhythms of life on the ranch and felt a quiet satisfaction in her growing competence. She still missed her family and her village, but she had begun to see that survival was possible here, even if it required patience and careful observation. Nayeli's relationship with the rancher remained complex. She still did not fully understand him, nor did she fully trust the intentions of anyone around her. But she had begun to notice that he acted with fairness, that he valued effort and respect over fear and control. This observation brought her a cautious sense of security, one that she had not felt since the day she was taken from her village. Time moved slowly on the ranch, yet each day brought new lessons for Nayeli. She had grown stronger, not only in body but also in mind. Her days were filled with the rhythm of work, from feeding the animals at sunrise to helping mend fences, gather firewood, and tend to the gardens that supplied the ranch's food. Each task was physical and demanding, yet she discovered a strange satisfaction in her ability to keep up, to contribute, and to see the tangible results of her efforts. Even though she missed her family, there was a sense of accomplishment that she had not known in her village, where she had often relied on others for guidance. The rancher continued to be a figure of quiet strength and observation. Nayeli noticed the way he moved through the ranch, his gaze carefully measuring the work of his hands and those of the workers around him. He seemed to anticipate problems before they arose, whether it was a sick animal, a fence that might break, or a task left incomplete. Nayeli admired this, not because she wanted to imitate him, but because she began to understand the kind of patience and foresight required to care for the land. Slowly, she began to see the ranch not as a place of captivity, but as a system of order, one where effort and respect mattered more than fear or force. Communication between Nayeli and the rancher remained a challenge, but progress was steady. She had learned enough English to understand simple instructions, and he had learned some Apache words through observation and repetition. They began to rely on gestures, nods, and the occasional shared smile. One day, as they worked together to mend a section of fence that had been damaged by a storm, the rancher handed her a hammer and pointed to a broken post. Nayeli understood immediately. As she lifted the tool, he gave her a slow nod of encouragement. It was a small moment, but it was a turning point for her. For the first time, she felt that he genuinely trusted her abilities. Nayeli also began to observe other aspects of the rancher's character. He was not someone who demanded blind obedience, but someone who expected thoughtfulness and effort. He spoke gently to the workers, even when they made mistakes, and he treated the animals with patience rather than anger. Nayeli was surprised by the consistency of his kindness. It was not performative or occasional, it was a part of who he was. This realization slowly chipped away at her fear, replacing it with a cautious curiosity. Could it be possible that a person like him existed in this world, a man who could wield power without cruelty? Despite the growing trust, Nayeli's mind often returned to her past. She remembered her family, the songs sung around the evening fire, and the stories of the elders that had shaped her understanding of life. These memories were bittersweet, reminding her of what she had lost, but also giving her the strength to endure. She began to incorporate these memories into her daily life on the ranch, quietly humming old songs while working or pausing to watch the sun dip below the hills, just as she had in her village. In these moments, she felt a connection to both her past and her present, as though she were threading the two worlds together inside herself. One afternoon, while helping gather water from a nearby stream, Nayeli slipped on the rocks and nearly fell. The rancher was nearby and quickly extended a steady hand to help her regain her balance. His eyes met hers, and he gave a reassuring smile. In that moment, Nayeli realized that his care was not only for the animals or the land but also for her. He was not just observing her out of duty, He was watching her to ensure her safety. The recognition of this fact was both comforting and unsettling. Nayeli had spent so long expecting danger that kindness felt almost foreign. As the weeks passed, small acts of connection continued to shape Nayeli's perception of the rancher. He would occasionally bring her food or water when she was busy, or he would adjust a task to make it more manageable for her. These gestures were simple, yet they carried a profound weight. Nayeli began to see that he respected her as a person, not merely as a worker or a captive. This understanding allowed her to relax slightly, though she remained careful not to assume too much. Trust had to be earned, and she had been burned by false hope before. Nayeli's growing confidence also manifested in her interactions with the animals. She had learned to recognize the moods of the horses and cattle, to anticipate their needs, and to calm them when they were frightened. The rancher noticed this talent and began to assign her more responsibility. She was allowed to lead the horses to pasture and assist with training the younger animals. Each task was a test, and each success built her sense of capability. She realized that she could thrive in this environment if she maintained focus, patience, and respect for those around her. There were moments of quiet reflection when Nayeli would sit alone on a hill overlooking the ranch. She would watch the patterns of life, the sun casting long shadows over the fields, the movements of the animals, the way the rancher and workers coordinated their efforts. In these moments, she felt a growing sense of understanding. Life on the ranch was structured, disciplined, and demanding, yet it also allowed room for observation, thought, and personal growth. She began to see parallels between this life and the teachings of her tribe: respect for the land, understanding the rhythms of nature, and valuing patience and observation over rash action. The rancher, too, seemed to sense her growing understanding. He began to involve her in more complex tasks, allowing her to make decisions and learn from mistakes. One day, he asked her to help organize the feed for the animals, a task that required planning and attention to detail. Nayeli took the responsibility seriously, arranging the supplies methodically and checking each portion carefully. When she finished, the rancher gave a slow nod of approval, and for the first time, Nayeli felt a genuine sense of accomplishment. She was not just surviving, she was contributing meaningfully to this new world. Even as trust developed, Nayeli remained cautious. She was aware of her vulnerability and knew that her life could change in an instant. But she also began to recognize that fear did not have to dominate her every thought. By observing the rancher and the workers, she learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She began to take small steps outside her comfort zone, initiating tasks without prompting and offering help where she could. Each act reinforced her growing independence and resilience. Over time, Nayeli's presence on the ranch began to influence others. The workers, who had initially regarded her with curiosity and skepticism, began to show respect. They noticed her competence, her care for the animals, and her willingness to work hard. Some would offer quiet encouragement, while others would seek her advice on minor tasks. Nayeli felt a sense of belonging that she had not anticipated, a community built not on blood ties but on shared effort, respect, and mutual reliance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Nayeli sat with the rancher near the fire. Words were sparse, but there was a growing understanding between them. He handed her a small piece of bread and gestured for her to eat. Nayeli took it with a nod, feeling a quiet gratitude. In the soft glow of the fire, she realized that their connection was not built on words alone but on observation, shared effort, and small acts of kindness. She was beginning to understand the man who had once seemed so distant and unknowable. The rancher, too, seemed to recognize her transformation. He observed her with a measured pride, noting her growing skill, confidence, and careful thought. While he still maintained boundaries, his actions reflected a growing respect for her abilities and character. Nayeli understood that trust was a two-way street. She could rely on him, but she also had to maintain her own vigilance. This balance became a guiding principle in her life on the ranch. As the months passed, Nayeli found herself thinking less about fear and more about possibility. She began to imagine a future where she could navigate this new world with competence and dignity. She would never forget her past, her family, or her tribe, but she also realized that survival required adaptation. By observing, learning, and respecting the world around her, she could carve a space where she was safe and capable. Through all of this, Nayeli's understanding of the rancher deepened. He was not a cruel man, nor was he infallible. He had his own struggles, past losses, and moments of frustration, but he had chosen to act with patience, fairness, and care. Nayeli realized that humanity was not always what she had expected. There were people capable of kindness, even in a world that had often seemed harsh and unforgiving. This understanding brought a cautious but genuine hope, one that she had not felt since the day she had been taken from her village. In these months, Nayeli had grown from a fearful, uncertain young woman into someone resilient, observant, and capable. She had learned to navigate a new world, to understand the rhythms of life on the ranch, and to recognize the quiet strength in others. Her connection with the rancher, built on trust, observation, and shared effort, had become a stabilizing force. She had not forgotten her past, but she had begun to build a new life, one that allowed for growth, understanding, and the possibility of safety. The seasons changed slowly on the ranch. The harsh heat of summer softened into the cool breezes of autumn, and Nayeli noticed the shift in the colors of the fields, the rustle of the leaves, and the way the animals adjusted to the new rhythms of the land. Life on the ranch had become familiar, and yet every day still brought challenges that tested her skill, patience, and understanding. She had grown stronger, not only in body but also in mind and heart. By now, Nayeli had gained the confidence to take on more responsibilities. She helped organize the feed for the animals, mended broken fences without guidance, and even guided the younger workers, teaching them what she had learned about handling the animals and caring for the land. She moved with purpose and awareness, observing every detail and thinking carefully before acting. The rancher noticed these changes and began to rely on her more, assigning her tasks that required trust, skill, and judgment. Nayeli felt a deep sense of pride. She had earned her place on the ranch not by force but by effort and respect. The bond between Nayeli and the rancher had deepened, though it remained quiet and subtle. They did not speak often in words, but they understood each other through gestures, shared tasks, and mutual observation. When she completed a difficult chore, he would give a small nod or a glance that conveyed approval. When he saw her struggling, he offered guidance, never criticism. Slowly, Nayeli realized that she was not alone here. There was someone who respected her, who valued her abilities, and who had chosen to treat her with fairness. It was a revelation she had not thought possible when she had first arrived, terrified and unsure of what the future held. One crisp morning, Nayeli was asked to help the rancher lead a group of horses to a distant pasture. The task was demanding. The horses were spirited and unfamiliar with the route. Nayeli's heart raced as she guided them, remembering all she had learned about patience, observation, and gentle control. The rancher rode beside her, calm and steady, offering occasional guidance through gestures and brief words. By the time they reached the pasture, Nayeli felt a sense of accomplishment that filled her with warmth. The rancher gave a subtle smile, and for the first time, Nayeli felt a profound understanding between them. She was no longer a captive. She was a trusted partner in the work of the ranch. Even as she grew more confident, Nayeli never forgot her past. She remembered the songs, stories, and lessons of her tribe, and she carried them silently in her heart. At night, she would sit by the fire, humming old melodies and thinking of her family. These moments were bittersweet, a reminder of what she had lost and what she had survived. Yet she also realized that these memories gave her strength. They reminded her that she could endure hardship, adapt to new circumstances, and maintain her dignity. The rancher continued to play a quiet but essential role in her growth. He had his own past, filled with challenges and losses, and it was clear that he understood hardship in his own way. Naeli began to see that he had chosen a life of work, patience, and care, and that he extended this philosophy not only to the land and animals but also to her. She respected him for this, not as someone to fear or obey blindly, but as someone whose actions reflected thoughtfulness and integrity. This respect was mutual. The rancher had come to recognize her resilience, skill, and careful judgment. One day, the rancher asked Naeli to help prepare the fields for the winter harvest. It was demanding work, requiring early mornings, careful planning, and attention to every detail. Naeli approached it with determination, guiding the workers, checking the soil, and making sure the tools were ready. She felt a sense of ownership over the task, a feeling she had never experienced before. When the work was complete, the rancher gave a quiet nod, his approval unspoken but deeply felt. In that moment, Naeli understood that she had truly become part of this world, not by erasing her past, but by building something new alongside it. As the days grew colder, Naeli found comfort in small routines. She would wake before sunrise, help with the morning chores, and take a few moments to observe the animals as they moved through the fields. She noticed the patterns of their behavior, the subtle changes in the wind, and the way the light shifted across the hills. These observations allowed her to anticipate problems, adjust her actions, and feel a growing sense of mastery over her environment. The ranch had become a place where she could act, think, and contribute, and this sense of agency gave her confidence and calm. Naeli's connection to the rancher grew quietly but steadily. One evening, as they were returning from the fields, he paused and gestured toward a section of the pasture that needed repair. He pointed, then nodded toward her, indicating that she should take charge. Naeli understood immediately. She organized the work, guided the younger workers, and completed the task efficiently. When she finished, the rancher simply nodded and turned away, but the acknowledgement was clear. Naeli realized that he trusted her not only to follow instructions but to lead, to make decisions, and to act responsibly. This trust was a gift she had earned, and it deepened her sense of belonging on the ranch. Even with all these responsibilities and connections, Naeli never allowed herself to forget her identity. She kept her cultural practices alive, remembering songs, rituals, and stories from her tribe. She would occasionally teach the younger workers simple songs or share her knowledge of plants and herbs. These moments allowed her to honor her past while integrating into her new life. She began to understand that survival did not mean abandoning who she was. Rather, it meant finding ways to carry her heritage forward in new circumstances. Over time, Naeli's life on the ranch became a balance of work, learning, and quiet reflection. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and isolation, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She had discovered that trust could be built through observation, kindness, and shared effort. She had learned that fear did not have to control her, that careful thought and patience could guide her through challenges, and that connection with others, human or animal, was possible even in unexpected places. The rancher's respect for Naeli was evident not only in the tasks he assigned, but also in the subtle ways he supported her growth. He gave her opportunities to demonstrate her skill, allowed her to take initiative, and treated her as a capable individual rather than someone to control. Naeli had learned to observe his methods, understand his intentions, and respond thoughtfully. Their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect and careful understanding, built on shared effort and quiet recognition rather than words alone. One morning, as snow began to dust the hills, Nayeli looked out over the ranch and felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had weathered storms, learned new skills, and navigated a world that had once seemed entirely foreign. She had built connections, earned trust, and created a life that, while different from her village, allowed her to survive with dignity and purpose. The ranch had become a place where she could grow, think, and act with intention, and this realization filled her with a quiet satisfaction. Nayeli also recognized the subtle ways in which the rancher had influenced her life. His patience had taught her the value of careful observation, his fairness had shown her the power of trust, and his quiet guidance had helped her navigate challenges without fear. She understood that survival was not merely about physical endurance, but about learning, adapting, and finding strength in both observation and action. This understanding allowed her to face each day with confidence, resilience, and hope. The bond between Nayeli and the rancher remained complex yet stable. Words were still limited, but gestures, actions, and shared experiences conveyed understanding, trust, and mutual respect. Nayeli realized that safety and connection were possible, even in a world she had once feared. She could rely on the rancher, not blindly, but with the knowledge that his actions reflected thoughtfulness and care. This understanding brought a sense of security she had never thought possible when she had first been taken from her village. As winter settled over the ranch, Nayeli found a rhythm that allowed her to thrive. She worked during the day, observed the animals and land carefully, and spent evenings reflecting quietly by the fire. She continued to honor her past, incorporating her cultural knowledge and practices into her daily life. At the same time, she embraced her new responsibilities, finding meaning and purpose in the work she did and the connections she had formed. By the end of her first winter on the ranch, Nayeli had undergone a profound transformation. She was no longer the frightened, uncertain young woman who had arrived months earlier. She was skilled, confident, and resilient. She had built trust and understanding with the rancher, earned the respect of the workers, and found ways to integrate her heritage into her new life. Most importantly, she had discovered that hope and safety were possible, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Nayeli understood that her life would always be shaped by the past, but she also realized that she had the power to shape her present and future. The ranch was no longer a place of fear, but a place of growth, learning, and cautious optimism. She had learned to observe, adapt, and act with intention. She had discovered trust, resilience, and the quiet power of human kindness. And as she looked out over the snow-dusted fields, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had survived, adapted, and found a place where she could live with dignity, strength, and hope.